Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. Today my guest is Robert Vane. Robert is the co-founder of the Q6FSA Method for Global Information Management. He's also the creator of the GT Domain Architect platform, which is a full enterprise-scale modern model-driven enterprise architecture. He's a freelance full enterprise scope enterprise architect with over 25 years of experience of getting it all wrong, as he says. And now he's dedicated to solving the foundational root causes of failure within the information management space and getting it all right. Robert is a passionate advocate and innovator for no-code, model, executable business systems engineering based on business language fundamentals. I hope you enjoy this show, so please like, share, comment with your colleagues and friends, and enjoy listening. Thank you. Robert Vane, thank you very much for coming onto the Data Strategy Show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
It's great. So listen, Robert, why don't we just kick off with you telling me a little bit about your background and where you are now, what you're up to?
Yeah, well, I'm started off really as a developer in the IT world, so I'm kind of one of those IT insiders. So if you cut me in half, you'd see Oracle written through my body. I started off as an Oracle developer and got into sort of more design roles. I went sideways into business analysis and all sorts of things. But I guess over the last 10 years or so, I've been focusing most on enterprise architecture and particularly the key bits of information management and semantics and ontologies and all those sort of nice things that we need in place before we can do any sensible work in the data space. So yeah, not necessarily in the analytics space. I'm not a data scientist by any stretch of imagination. I'm more of a foundational person, but so I've been working in that area, basically creating methods and methodologies and tools to basically make all that stuff easier. So yeah, must apologise about the darkness of my face. Unfortunately,
all right.
I'm lacking a front-facing camera. I've actually got my iPhone with its light facing
yes.
me. Otherwise, it would just be a dark blob.
It's still not working, Robert.
No. We'll get closer.
But I'll tell you what, those people who listen to this on the podcast won't even see you.
No, that's true. I can go creepy face.
I had my Christmas antlers on for my last episode. That was my last episode of last year, 2 days just before the new year. But listen, so now you're sort of an enterprise architect, right? Is that what you'd consider yourself?
Well, I mean, I'm a kind of a specialist in sort of multidiscipline. So I like to basically understand how to actually combine architecture with delivery and service management and all those things really. So I'm very interested in actually that sort of federation and collaboration aspect of it all, which is very, very key on the work that I've done with the methodology Q6FSA, which is all about federation and collaboration primarily. The architecture is kind of secondary to the ability to do that. But where I'm heading is towards removing a lot of that technology underpinnings, basically, because at the moment we're very application code centric, and there's lots of people that basically are working in that area and trying to become data centric or business centric or whatever centric. I like to think that actually what we should be going towards is actually model centric. So getting to the stage where a lot of the underpinnings, a lot of the technology just basically is irrelevant to the business user and to the architects and to the designer. So you create business models, a bit like it was like in the 1990s with Oracle Case. You had this fabulous thing that could basically generate out systems for you, and all you have to do is put a bit of metadata in out it popped. It was fabulous stuff. But that kind of didn't get anywhere because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have that rich UI. It was still very client server, and it was all a bit rubbish. And the things you could change and enhance were a little bit poor. But now there's so much technology out there, and it's so easy to become visually rich. With a little bit of configuration, that I think it's probably time that we started moving towards removing a lot of this code that we keep writing every single time, every single company writing the same bits of code to do the same thing. For me, it just doesn't make sense. It's probably become lazy. You know, I only like to write something once. So, so you know, I'm heading towards basically creating a metadata platform that's so rich that it can generate out most of what applications do, effectively. Most of what business processes do, most of what applications do. It makes sense to me.
Yeah. So let me just, I mean, that's a lot that you've just said this. Let me just unpack that. Something you said about, you know, Q6FSA, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I know that that's something you're very passionate about. But you know, I was listening to one of your videos earlier on in the week, well, actually last week, and you talked about working towards a business model future, and having a self-executing business model. Just tell me a little bit more about that, because that's you know, sort of, when people hear that, they think, oh, what do you mean a self-executing business model? So how does that work in the real world?
So this is actually putting a framework together. So you have a framework that instantly translates the architecture, the metadata, into a working system. So for example, you could create you could use business language and concepts to basically create an information structure that's for gathering some data and a bit more metadata there, and all of a sudden you've got a screen in front of you that basically is just there, it's working. And then the next thing that happens is possibly that then gets stored to a database or turns into an integration. You just basically keep enhancing it, and it's actually working in front of you at the same time. So in terms of, it's more than a rapid prototype. It literally is building the business systems in front of your eyes. But there was a lot of challenges that had to be solved to do that. So obviously you can't spend months and months and months designing the perfect, you know, database structure underneath it, because you know, you can't do that. So there had to be a way of actually soft coding all that data stuff underneath. So you know, when you use, I prefer to use business terminology rather than technical jargon, technical lexicons anyway. So you define your business terminology that relates to, you know, something which then it knows how to store it, and it knows basically how that works. So all that stuff underneath is irrelevant now. So all you do is you construct your business processes, your screens, your business rules, combine them together, and your application is there. It's working. It's in front of you. You know, the business users can literally construct their own system.
So that's interesting, because I mean, you know, hearing that's like that should be revolutionary in the way that we operate, in the way that a business generates applications. And you know what the funniest thing is, when we think about it, business terminology hasn't really changed for what, 50 years. So I mean, apart from some of the sorry, what's that?
Yeah, more than that, hundreds of years.
Well, maybe. But you know, I guess we've still got the idea of an invoice. We've still got a product. We've got a customer. So that sort of supply chain piece hasn't changed. In what you've just expressed there around Q6FSA, it's quite a word to say without. Why isn't that in place now? What's happened in the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years for everything to get skewed like this, and for you now to come back to this world of simplicity? Because that's what it sounds like. You want to get back, you want to reclaim that simplicity and help business people basically build their own business models, I guess. What's happening?
Not just build their own business models, but have something working at the end. I mean, we've gone through, obviously, 50 or 60 years ago, we had a number of data theories arrive. We had the relational theory from COD. We had a number of things happening there. I wrote an article recently on LinkedIn about the 7 deadly sins around that, but quite a few assumptions were made, and those assumptions were there was lots of dichotomies in there. So the theory basically said that you should create the perfect model and basically combine everything together and you know, create an enterprise data model. The politics basically said, no, actually, we're a department. We've got our departmental server there. What we want is a database to do this. So the business was pulling one way, the theory was pulling the other way. And what happened was we ended up with this departmental computing paradigm, the application-centric paradigm that basically we live with today. And what mashes it together effectively is integrations basically mash together the data between these sort of data-hungry silos, and BI basically rips it all out and doesn't make sense of it. So if you break down those boundaries and
no, go on. You.
Sorry. Yeah, if you start to basically think, well, why we done it this way? There is obviously a set of tribal behaviors that you have to deal with. You can't standardize everything, because as soon as you standardize everything, you have that issue of basically consensus.
Mm-hmm.
And what will happen is the most dominant function will effectively drive that process, and everybody else will get disenfranchised, and basically it doesn't happen. Sure. So things like, quite often MDM projects and suffer from this basically. So the primary function, it puts bias into the process, nobody else then buys in. So the three killers of interoperability: consensus, bias, and granularity. These things basically, if you don't manage them properly, then all you basically get is the tribes resisting the tribal behavior. Because we're humans. We like to have things the way we want. So you need a way to balance standardization. Mm-hmm. And most of the theory over the last 50 years has all been standardization based against tribalism, which the theory that we've been working with tries to completely eradicate it, tries to banish it.
Right.
But you can't do that. It's a losing game. You can't do that. You have to be able to work with it. So any methodology you use has to be able to deal with tribal behavior and standardization at the same time. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you just can't control that consensus issue. Yes. Sorry, where were we?
So the interesting. Well, we were talking about Q6FSA and really this whole thing about the business model future. So the idea that a business individual can literally from the ground up, it sounds like, build the applications, the integrations, or build not the applications, but their working, the working model for how they want to interact with things and objects and people and entities. And then the interesting is what you said about COD. So COD, if I think about it, gosh, that's a long time ago that I referenced COD, but that was all around the relationship modeling across a business.
It was, but
it started as the entity relationship sort of design, as such, right? So you had this the way that the whole enterprise worked, and I remember the crow's feet and all those kind of things with it. And
have you ever seen one that actually covers a whole enterprise?
No, I haven't. You're right. And when I'm trying to think back, oh gosh, almost 30 years ago now, to that the COD manual and some of the pictures that they had there about a specific department or function. So I'm sort of trying to visualize that. So an individual will take what they do. So you're basically saying that Q6FSA is built on processes,
and language.
And those processes say, for example, if I'm in the shipping department, and I want to build my own application whereby I understand the items that I need to ship, where they need to be shipped to, how, the weight, the size, etc. You're telling me that I could literally spin that up and have that in front of me. How would I do that as a business person? I'm not a designer. I'm not I'm not a metadata developer. I don't really, do stuff like that.
Absolutely true. Well, most of that information will already be created by someone else, because if you actually add those business models, for example, product management, So the product management people would have to get involved first, and they would basically define how that works. So that data would already be accessible. So there's that business language, which is product, around the product area. All you have to do is leverage it and say, I want this bit, and there you go. So you're right. So there is a layer of visualization that has to go on top of this, which is very, 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 very human friendly. Yeah. And we tend to basically, because we spend a lot of time basically knee deep in code and those sort of things most of the time. There hasn't been much investment in a way to basically allow business users to define a process in their own terms, in their own language. And you've got to basically think about what people generally do. So they want to capture some data. So you know, the first thing you do is you have to have a mechanism, a visual mechanism, which is basically, I want to capture something. Yeah. And then have the ability to say, well, I know what I want to capture because I want this, and this in terms of information items, in terms of, you know, in terms of business information, and have a way to basically say, well, we've already defined what that language is, what that business information. So all I want to do is combine this, and this, and show it to me, and basically show it to me, you know, capture that. And a very, very simple way of saying we're acquiring something. These are the things we're acquiring, and I'm going to basically paint these on the canvas. Boom, there you go. Yeah, save. Yeah, and at the same time, as you're moving things around the canvas, the working system is there on the right, basically, and things are moving as well.
Right.
So then that's your final pretty looking sort of capture screen, and then you basically, well, what happens next? Yeah, well, next I basically need to send this to that person over there. Now you can go through the process of saying, okay, well, that means we have to store it to the database, we have to create an integration, we have to move it across to this application. That then basically needs another bit of software to then bring it into their UI.
Yeah.
Don't even bother doing that. Construct another UI structure and say that goes to that.
So I mean, you make it sound extremely simple, and I guess, you know, from the lay person here on the other side, is thinking
we overcomplicate stuff. We just overcomplicate all this stuff, and because we've created these process detached databases, because one of the assumptions that Cobb made in those days was you can detach data from process and have no material damage, no negative effect. Yeah. But that's not the case.
And I think I know what you mean there. I've certainly seen the issues and challenges that we now have in many corporations, you know, companies dealing with the siloed effect of building applications, but the siloed effects of data, the constant integration issues that they have, the several databases that they're always trying to consolidate into a data warehouse or a data lake or a data swamp or whatever it might be. But, you know, I'm trying to think about this in a way which is, okay, so I've just invested in a new ERP system, a new CRM system. I've got, you know, I don't know, an analytics platform. I've got a data warehouse. I've got some cloud stuff. How does this kind of say you just get rid of that all, or, you know, does your methodology sit on top of it? How does it absolutely? Because I can't see people saying, right, let's get rid of Salesforce tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it can do both. So if you have an established application there, it can basically just read in the data that you need for these processes. Now, that would make an enterprise data architect sort of twitch a lot because that's not what we want to do. So yes, you're right. Moving forwards, the benefit here is if you use this soft-coded storage mechanism across the whole piece, yes, you get the benefits. But this is not quite the same as remodeling something into, say, RDF triples or whatever. It's not the same as that. You actually retain the same structure across the process. So you're not remodeling the data to make
okay. So you're building it, as you said earlier, based on metadata. So you've got one source. You've got you've defined all of the metadata around the way that the business objects are. Is it the way that the business works and operates?
No, it's the way that the process operates more than anything.
Okay. Sorry, that's what I meant in that sense.
Yeah. So if you were designing something as a process, you would very rarely actually create a business entity, because each of the components of the process tend to be cross business entity, or
Sure.
also can be. So when you're doing digital transformation, it would be very strange to create that. A digital transformation, a fabulous UI that is so locked to the structure underneath it that it just looks like you're a forms application. That's not how you do it. You combine things together and you capture things and you have different groupings. The mathematics of that is called a disjoint union. So you have a number of concepts basically, and you can join them together whichever way you like. Yeah.
Right.
So for example, the example I had before. So you have a user that's been able to define something which captures something, maybe it's some shipping information. There's no reason why you then can't apply the business rules at that point in time to say, well, this is being captured now. What else needs that?
Right.
So there's a UI over there that needs that bit. There's a BI data set which would like to group it this way and have that available there, and then that has another thing which then groups it another way. So you can use that method to basically create event-driven processes. Yeah. And it's all based on the fact that you have a library of definitions that you can basically, an ontology, should we say, a library of business definitions that you track consistently through this whole process. So I'm saying, rather than basically saying, I'm storing this information, I'm writing it I'm splitting it out to 5 different tables in a relational database model, and then collating it back and get it together into an integration payload. I'm firing it across an integration. I'm receiving it at the other end. I'm splitting it back down into their database structure. I'm collating it back again, and eventually it hits the UI. Yeah, that's an awful lot of technology. Just literally, one user over here looking at it and one user over there looking at it. Yeah.
So I think there are complexities in organizations that would obviously be beyond the one user one-to-one relationship.
Yeah.
But I'm with you in the sense that to simplify, to base things on process, to provide the necessary items to an individual for their working model, to how they run their business. It sounds like you are suggesting that, and I think you said it or you've quoted it before, that Q6FSA is the defense against big data, ML, AI, and so on. So are you saying that we're going to get rid of all of the data practitioners and
it vastly reduces the need for all that stuff,
right?
Because you are effectively building your analytics in line. So you're building these data sets as you go. But there will obviously still be the need to do more long-term analysis on data. But you could buy that in.
But there would still be a need to apply algorithms and various techniques on top of that data, or are you saying that there is another way around that?
Yeah, I mean, and you can call those in as a business service, or you could. And 99% of what we do is simple aggregations, groupings, and fairly simple statistical stuff. And if you build those in line into the whole process, I mean, the idea here is as a user is going through a process, if they have a choice point, so effectively, which way do I go? Which decision do I make? I can't see why we can't get to I'm getting there. The situation where the visualization to support that choice basically is already there.
Right.
All you have to do is say here's the choice you need to make, and here is the visualized information that makes me make that choice. And if I can't make that choice, you're then basically following process rules. You escalate to somebody else. Right. Or you use collaborative tools to say, oh, have a look at this. What do you think? Yeah. So it's a different way of thinking about the problem. Yeah. But the key thing here is that you're trying to store information as much as possible only once, and then just provide windows onto it.
And that's absolutely makes sense, because I know that most organizations now have got multiple databases, duplications right across that.
Oh yeah.
And therefore trying to even put, and that's why I think MDM fails quite a lot.
Well, where is my master? Everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. Yeah. So I think, we're in a world where we've gone beyond the sort of sanity of trying to pull that together. So it's which companies or are companies using this at the moment? Which companies are absolutely saying we're going to redefine the way that we do things, and we're going to layer in this type of methodology and approach for our strategies? Because it sounds like that this is very much around building from the bottom up, and being able to model your business in a way that is very fluid. Dare I say the word agile?
It's so agile you don't need the software. So
and seamless. And based on process. So where do all the where does the entire IT department go?
Very, very good question. If you think about the IT department as we have now, basically, so they have either well, not if you're a hyperscale microservice, it's kind of different for that. But if the traditional IT department is basically supporting lots of monolithic and legacy, not legacy, that's a horrible word, monolithic, because they still work, but monolithic applications, and there are specialists in that area, and they're spending an awful lot of time, and they're basically keeping an eye out on integrations and all that kind of stuff. So yes, in theory, what they would be doing is basically looking after the framework as it executes. Yeah, the idea, and making sure it's got enough storage underneath and all that kind of stuff. But it becomes more an architectural driven endeavor. So would this
then be the it's a term that people are using now, very much around business architecture?
Yes,
as opposed to data or enterprise architecture.
Well, yeah, business architecture, I see enterprise architecture as two main pillars, and then a number of things that basically we've created to support that. So business architecture, information architecture are the two main pillars there, and we've created application architecture, integration architecture, because of the way that we effectively construct systems. Mm-hmm. Now, if we don't construct systems that way, a lot of those disciplines become irrelevant, because all you're doing is effectively saying, so here is the business architecture, here is the roles, the roles, the business rules, etc. Here is the information, here is the language of the data that basically we deal with. Let's just connect them together and create business systems. Yeah. So yes, in theory, there's a whole IT machine to break down. Effectively, you can almost call it an industrial complex now. It's just as powerful as the oil military one. And, the IT industry is huge, and it wields so much power, and it moves people towards software, applications, new technology every 5 years. It's an endless.
Yeah. It's a continuous
set of hype cycles.
Yeah.
So the Valhalla here is that you just remove all that from the picture. I mean, I'm not going to make a lot of IT companies very, very happy. But in theory, it might make a few business people quite happy, because all this stuff they need to engage with basically disappears.
Tell me a little bit about the collaboration piece here, because from I'm standing listening. I'm sorry, I'm actually sitting listening to this. You're standing, but it sort of I get this view that this could take a lot of time to unravel and begin again, basically, because it sounds like you've got to go back to a business language and not a technology language.
Correct. Yeah. So all those technology lexicons that you were saying before about the fact that language and the things business does essentially hasn't changed in centuries, which is true. I mean, but the technology's changed.
Yes.
But what's happened is that we've allowed those technology lexicons to basically overwhelm the business language, and the business language hasn't really changed that much. So yeah, I mean, there are lots of new ways of doing things. The internet basically gives us capability, but that's all it is. It's an architectural capability. It's not, what you actually do on the internet in terms of your business is still the business. Yeah, you still sell stuff, you create invoices, you show products, you do all that kind of stuff. So it's still the same.
I'm gonna, I work with businesses, I work with companies to embed data strategies that are aligned to the business, what the business drivers are, where they want to go, why they want to do it, how we can, minimize risk or accelerate growth or, create cost efficiencies within their business. So if I'm coming at it from that point of view, where is it that I start to hit Q6FSA? Is it within the process of building the data strategy, and I then I sort of have the metadata, and I guess it sounds like it's it's metadata out, right?
Yes.
So it's built on the foundations of metadata, and therefore I use that as my way of engaging with the business and being able to then build that foundation. Is that true?
Yeah, almost true. We're building out something at the moment called active strategy, which actually allows you to put those strategic components, those business drivers, assumptions, constraints, scope, all that kind of stuff, and connect it to those business models.
Right.
So it informs the business models moving forwards.
So that's your bridge to the business strategy. That's your bridge to where the business is going.
Yeah. So yeah, we call them business topics. So there is still business architecture, which is roles, organizational structures, and business rules, etc. But those organizational structures, if it's of a certain type, then in theory may have a number of policies that apply to that, or principles, or so it's rippling those business topics that are cross architecture. So through that process, from strategy down to blueprint, down to design, down to execution. So you have an active strategy that's always accessible. So and also affirmed as well when it needs to be. So, for example, if you have a data principle that you need to affirm every time you create, a new database.
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, so I was trying to do that. Yeah. So for example, you may well set up a number of principles within your data strategy, which are basic data principles. They tend to get hidden away in a PowerPoint somewhere in a Word document.
They do. Yeah.
And what doesn't happen is that they don't connect to the next bit of work. So the next bit of work is possibly a blueprint. So here's a data blueprint for our, for example, order to cash value stream. Yeah. So here's the blueprint. Here's all the business language that's involved in it. This is how we're going to do it. The principles should drive that. Yeah. And that blueprint itself that then produces a new set of constraints and guidelines, etc., which then needs to filter down to the next level, which is possibly a project in its high level design. Yeah, and that high level design then needs to filter down to the next thing, which is low level design, and eventually all these things need to filter through. So somebody, like an agile team, that basically keep saying, well, we don't know what the requirements are. Well, we do, because it's all documented somewhere. And if that filtered down to the agile team, so they can trace back and say, well, these are the principles that are involved. These are all the key bits in terms of what I'm doing in terms of the blueprint. These are the key bits in terms of the high design. And it's all focused on what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to create an integration, it's all integration specific. If you're trying to create a user interface, it's all user interface specific. So you can bring in things like usability and accessibility and all those sort of principles into that one, because it's a different kind of feature. If you start building it that way, it means that nobody's got an excuse to basically say we didn't know we didn't know we should do it that way. So the guidelines are already there.
Yeah,
that's active strategy. Yeah. So
okay, so that active strategy then takes you from what you're doing as a business. As you said, it layers in policies and processes and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm an IT guy, and I'm sitting there saying, well, what about security then?
Yeah. Security so in terms of security, I mean, that's a discipline obviously within it's a discipline within architecture. It's also discipline within compliance as well. So there are policies and there are rules and there are benefits and all those sort of things that can be defined at that level and then flow through. So imagine if you're building a database and in your high-level design, it automatically links into the information security strategy, and the information security strategy states guideline. This should be encrypted at rest.
Right.
Yeah. You don't have to ask that question anymore.
Okay.
So you don't have to sit in a group of 10 people 4 times a week asking, should we be encrypting this? No, actually the guideline's there. Yeah. You can imagine the amount of time saved not basically asking questions that somebody already knows.
And that's what's going through my mind right now.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have, as you said, the meeting with 20 people trying to work this out. You'd have all the guidance, you'd have all the policies, you'd have everything. But that's incumbent on the organization to build those policies before you start this process. That's
very true, very true. A lot of them are common anyway. So if you imagine, the archetypal average data architect or information architect, there's a lot of common strategy and guideline there. Best practice. That best practice can be just built in to that discipline, and then the bits that are specific to what you're doing, can be client specific or possibly even industry specific. So there may well be guidelines that you have to bring in because you're an FCA regulated retail business. Yeah. So that business strategy, that those constraints, could be built into a retail template or a commerce template or a manufacturing template or whatever, or MOD or whatever. And those things, because you're in this industry, you inherit these things, and therefore these things are automatically within your design brief. Yeah. So that's kind of the active strategy stuff. So that's how the strategy links into the architectural, the process of going from an idea to a working business system. So that's how that works. Then we basically have the other way, which is we start with business language. So we start with in the information space, we start with what are the I like to use the word atomicity. So the idea is,
what word is that? Say that again.
Atomicity. So you should be able to start with the fundamental nouns and verbs of business language. Yeah. Start constructing them up into basically business attributes, so things that you would assign to a column. So what tends to happen is that quite a lot of the theories are very, very loose in this area. So they basically say, we're going to create a table, we're going to give it a label. We're going to create a column, we can give it a label. And those labels are vague, and the information actually stored against that label, actually, it could be 15 different concepts basically rolled together into one. So you need to be able to start from the lowest level, roll up, and make sure that you keep that contextual reasons, and that's when you also start bringing in pragmatic competence, because you know basically what you're looking at has the context of that, all its relationship to your business strategy and all that kind of stuff is and which application it's in, or which module or which process is always there. It's part of your metadata, so you always have that context, and then you can start building from that into we have a set of things that we can assign to a column or a screen, a screen field or whatever. Yeah. So that's the property level, and then you can start rolling up and saying, well, actually, we also have groups of properties that basically are reusable as well, and we have models that are reusable. We can start looking at that and building those together as well. So the whole process in terms of Q6FSA is starting with language first, and then using that language to standardize the whole business systems construction from that point. So
would you say that that's driven by business artifacts, then things like business glossaries and those types of...
A business glossary is part of it. So you need to be able to do a number of things. One, you need to be able to say, here are the atomic things that basically we need to control. Here are the groupings of those things which represent business attributes. But at the same time, we need to say this particular business attribute is known by this label here, and this label here. So
say if I've got I don't know, product, for example,
Yeah.
Do you term it as product then, or would you term it as something completely different?
Well, product is a concept within Q6FSA, so it can apply to any number of structures. It's a descriptive concept.
Mm-hmm.
So the way it works as well is you can create a logical domain of product, which is all things product, and then you can go into possibly product price or online catalog, but it will inherit products effectively as
as long as you've got a logical grouping that makes sense for a collective of products.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
There's 10, 15, 16 different ways product can be used or grouped within, probably even 100 within most retail organizations. So you have your basic product information, you have the pricing, you have products that effectively are active and can be sold. You have products that basically were historical and been bought. I mean, all these things are different compositions of all these concepts. And if you don't call out what they are, it's very difficult then, especially when you get to the BI space, when somebody says, product, when somebody has product there or product quantity or whatever, or product price, is it the current price? Is it historical price? Is it the price it was bought at? Is it the price that we discounted it at? All those sort of things, yeah. And if you don't go through the process of saying, well, actually, on this particular application table, it's actually the product price as of a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a historical product price as of this time. Then basically, if you're seeing something over here that's slightly different in terms of its makeup, you're not comparing apples with apples, and therefore you don't combine them. It's not the same thing. I mean, COVID has proved this kind of test results based on this kind of lab, that kind of test. All the numbers basically don't add up because the context is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have that. This is all about pragmatic confidence, all about pragmatic. So it's exactly the same as a young child learning how to basically comprehend what somebody else says. They learn pragmatic confidence.
Sure.
Conversation within context, and all that's happening is it's computers talking to each other. So a computer effectively is just doing some talking for us.
Yes.
Yeah. And if we don't tell the computer the intent of that conversation, and the other computer at the other end doesn't know how to interpret that, you have no pragmatic confidence. So
I like that term. I'm just going to write that down.
Pragmatic confidence. Yeah.
Pragmatic confidence. I like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of things. There's a big difference between semantics, which is effectively giving something meaning out of context, which is fine. That's good.
Yep.
And pragmatics, which is okay. So we've got the semantic definition, but actually it changes because the context is different.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that there's loads and loads of assumptions that were made 50 or so years ago, and a lot of them were around about pragmatics, because you touch from process, you don't know what the context is, and therefore how do you apply pragmatic confidence to what you're doing within maybe the most perfect database structure in the world, but unless you've got the purpose and the context there of every single use case of that, what basically happened was they said, okay, if we detach process from data and we use this fabulous logical theory and predicate logic and all these, it was a beautiful theory. It was magical theory. It was beautiful. But if you do that, then I'll make it to be able to deal with multiple use cases because we've structured it perfectly. Which case are we using now? Mm-hmm. And that's all outside the database. That's in the code. That's in the process. That's in the interactions with the users. It's not in the database. Database doesn't hold that. He's completely unaware of that kind of stuff. So it's not even in the theory. So
will this methodology and approach to building out the way that a business model is generated, and going back to your a self-executing business model, does this reduce the time to sort of develop? So now, for example, it takes, I don't know, a year to put in a CRM application properly, and it's never in properly, to be fair. And people aren't using it, and people aren't putting in the right details, and people aren't keying in the right data, and the back end is all bad data quality, and so we're
yeah,
in a real mess, right?
yeah,
and then someone else will just say, oh, you know what, we're going to change that in a couple of years anyway, so we're going to get a new one and we're going to integrate that data in, but we're not going to attack data quality and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Does this help that context of companies beginning to reduce that time to value?
Yes, because if you do this right, you can construct a process which is an end-to-end flow, which is capture to monetization. You can do that within, as somebody who's sitting next to you. If you have skilled people that know how to operate the framework, and you have all the architectural strategy and all the guidance there, you can construct these things very, very quickly. I mean, you can go through a particular flow and just basically build it out. So I mean, that's the whole idea here. And what we're doing is we're building up a large reference library of terminology to make that even simpler, because 99% of the time, most of the terminology that you use is not specific to your company. It's retail terminology or commerce terminology, or
so it's external. You're saying it's external terminology that's been impacted on us as a business, or is it? Because surely there must be. So something else in my head is you keep talking about business language, and so are you suggesting that everybody speaks the same language in the way?
No, because that's what glossary, that's what the business glossary is to translate between tribes.
Yeah.
So yes, you can basically choose the most common word for the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can have say an atomic concept of approve, which basically is a concept or product. Yeah, but as people use that, they can create their own translations of that, assuming that as long as they basically link that back to the same concept.
Right, to the same. So I see. So you've got a high level, as you say, a concept there, business concept.
Yeah.
And that then has, so that's the parent, and it's got these child relationships that sort of pin back to it.
So link relationships. So you can have things like, it's linguistics 101. You can have plural forms, you can have past forms, you can have inflections and variations, slang, all those acronyms, abbreviations, all basically linked.
And so you could literally have that for any user, and whatever terminology they use, that would be, they could just pick that as long as it goes back to where where that business concept is.
That's right, and you can do that across multiple spoken languages as well. You could have
right. I was going to ask you that as well.
You can have a Geordie lexicon and a Macam lexicon and a Brummie one. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? That'd be fun to have
oh my goodness, that would be crazy.
I know. If you imagine countries like South Africa, I think they have something like 19 regularly spoken languages there. So they basically have the almost instant problem of everything has to basically work in 19 languages.
Sure.
So
yeah. Interesting. I mean, I'm extremely sort of surprised, probably, that you mentioned what much earlier in the conversation, that there was an application that existed by a very large company, but it just didn't have the right technology behind it, or it didn't have the right capability. So why didn't they build on that? Why didn't they actually, use it and then build that so that we wouldn't be frustrated by all these, these technology.
So now we're back to effectively the IT industry machine.
Yeah.
And it's smaller brother, the data industry machine, but in theory that might even be big brother now. I'm not sure. We have effectively a dependency culture here.
Right.
So if we keep the status quo going, that there will effectively be new fads, new trends every 5 years. We'll be dependent on software coding, and we'll basically keep doing the same thing. Yeah. Well, I remember back in the 90s. I mentioned Oracle Case.
Yeah.
That was a metadata-driven way of basically building out a basic forms application. We can do a lot better now because we have the internet. We can go much richer with that look and feel.
Okay, so it was back then. It was the look and feel. It was
sort of like
Tetris or something like that.
And everything was client server. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had widescreens effectively. I mean, these things were running Oracle Forms in block mode on Wise terminals, and then we had desktops there, and the first version of Windows came out, and we had the whole client server thing. But that was binaries basically deployed to either a shared file or to your actual computer on your desk. It's not the same as now. I mean, the things you can do in the browser nowadays is incredible. Yeah. And that's accessible anywhere in the world. I mean, and one of the things about the business model driven paradigm is that because it doesn't care where the data is, you can basically have a looking at a screen where each one of the elements in that screen is completely geographically somewhere else. It's not connected on one table basically underneath the application. You could have basically product information that's coming from a product system that's in the US. The rest of it could be it could be anywhere in the world. It doesn't care because that's all managed underneath. Yeah. So you can start distributing data as well. So you can start having tribal implementations across various countries that are slightly different because they work slightly differently, but it's manipulating the same data. So pretty much opens up. I guess I'm just very, very keen that the Valhalla here is really just removing all this technology complexity and all this technology language from the picture, because it's doing nobody any favors.
Yeah, and I think that's where, but to address it, you talked about the hype cycle that we're in, and unfortunately, as we have grown and we've had the technological revolution, I can't see that changing.
No, that's true.
How do you see it could change? Where let me just ask you that. How do you think it could change?
Well, it's interesting because some of the big players are already getting into the space of componentizing the whole process. And you can imagine the likes of Microsoft Azure and AWS if they came up with this kind of framework and just made it available to the world, build your own application, then it would take on. Obviously, some of the not quite as big as Microsoft by any stretch of imagination, as myself, has a bit of an uphill battle there, persuading the world to do it differently. But that's where you are really.
And have you implemented this in a business so far? Have you?
Okay, so there's three elements here. There's basically the core foundation, which makes the information architecture soft coded. So that's the Q6FSA bit. That we've piloted that in a number of places. The business model generation stuff, which is actually something different. That's federated event. That's Fiat. That's federated event architecture. We are just finalising that at the moment because we had to sort data out first. We had to remove that. We had to remove that need to basically define things in advance, and also remove and tilt things away from predicate logic. And that everything has to be logical. Oh, you're right. Everything
I was scratching my ear and headphones nearly fell off.
What the data industry has done recently, they've gone the opposite way to what we've done.
Right.
So the data industry is basically trying to formalize relationship even more. But that's okay. But the way that I feel, if you formalize a relationship, then you are making multiple viewpoints more difficult. Yeah. So if you have one viewpoint, yes, formalize relationships, because you can then show that a very, very small set of people in a very small context, that this is a relationship between X and Y. If you then go to an enterprise scale or even industry scale and say, oh, well, actually, no, we've actually got 70 different viewpoints on this, how do you make a choice? And the way that works is the choice is made in the code. So you look at basically what's underneath, what's stored, and the code basically then resolves it, and the code then basically becomes, you end up being code bound.
Yeah.
Whereas what Q6FSA does, it completely removes relationships. We don't have formalized relationships in the methodology at all. All relationships are by association. So if it's collected together, it's related. That's it. Okay. And removing that just opened all the doors in terms of being more process centric. You're not having to put code in the middle of a grouping of data.
Yeah. And quite rightly, as you said earlier on, you're trying to transport a bit of data from here, or a process. You're trying to help that process along to the other person in the chain, and you've got some data coming along with that. And what you want to do is just have a straight line. You don't want to have to go and then put that into another system and then transform it and put it into a data warehouse and then transform that and then get it to the other person through an application. So it sounds like there could be a lot of steps broken down. And
that's true. And it's even more than that, because the person over here may well be somewhere on the African continent, entering it in their language. Yeah.
So
the person over here can look at the same data in their own natural language.
Right. Okay. So this is very much sort of open source technology. I don't want to use the word technology, but open source in that sense. It's a way for you to limit the friction that occurs in businesses through applications that will help seamless processes through an organization to collect, store, manage, provide insight, and gain, I guess, to do the things that they, what a business strategy wants to do is to make money, or, so actually, while I was saying that, the something struck me. Right now, we've got a massive drive and push on three fronts. I see a lot of people talking about data governance, a lot of people talking about data quality, and then people talking about data literacy.
Yes, interesting. Yeah.
So those three things have sort of, that triumvirate, that triangle of there's a lot of chatter about that at the moment. How would Q6FSA then take that nightmare away from people? And therefore, would we still have the data quality or data literacy issues? How would we sort of, work within that context?
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's start with data literacy first. That's another IT, the data industry construction.
And I think that's interesting for me.
It's curing a symptom that we created ourselves. So I actually prefer to go the other way. What I prefer, and this is where the model, the business model driven executable platforms, the way they work. You start with the business language first. So you start with here is the business language that we use, and this is how I want to construct it into flows. There's no issue of data literacy there, because they're using their own language to construct their own business system.
Right.
So why do they need to be data literate?
So here's the thing, though, because the way that many people have let's say defined data literacy is the ability to analyze, read, argue with data.
Yes. That's very true. So imagine there's two sides to that. There's there's the kind of analytic side of it, and there will always be a need for this large scale, more machine learning ad hoc BI that basically is based on the data that you store.
Yeah.
But most of what happens is operational reporting. That operational reporting is actually fairly well defined from the data you've got, and it tends to be localized. It tends to be tribal.
Yep.
If you break down those application barriers, if you're not storing things effectively in application silo, because the silos are effectively soft-coded, they're virtual. Although your business tribe basically thinks they're running an application and not, they're actually running just basically a part of the whole. Because the rest of the whole is already there. If they need to bring in other bits of data, it's already available to them. All they've got to do is call it in and say, I want this concept in there as well. This is how it works. All the linking and joining is handled by the framework.
Right. Okay. So I don't have to sit there and do any sort of SQL scripting and do outer joins and inner joins and this and that and try and radically do something different. You're saying that I've built it from the bottom up. I've then got all those concepts that are available to me.
Yeah.
Me as a person in the engineering department can go and get stuff from the accounts department, because I might need to look at, the widgets that I've built and how many I've sold, and perhaps the finance people would then want to know how much revenue they're getting from those widgets. So all of those things are available to everybody, typically as an open source kind of aspect. And then I can just build what I want to do for my own tribal area, as you call it, a tribe. And then what happens when I get to the point where the executives want to start building their own stuff, or they want to see that enterprise-wide view of what's happening across the business, how are we measuring things, both internal and external, and how does that sort of flow and get there?
Those KPIs are quite definable. So those KPIs are generally built in a fairly simplistic form by accumulating, grouping, aggregating that base data. So as I said before, you're actually building those aggregations into your process flow. So as you're collecting the data, if somebody wants a new aggregation of it, you just basically define that in the process, and as the data comes in, it's self-aggregating. Yeah.
Right.
So there is a data set that effectively you can then visualize to say, well, it's already there, it's already built. So I'm not saying that there's no architecture going on. There is.
Sure. I think I can see that.
It's a very architecture-driven process.
Yeah.
But what it isn't effectively is a software engineering process.
Right. So
the software is already written.
Yeah. So what you're saying to me is that you're not getting an application off the shelf and using that, and then trying to fit my business to that. That's basically, there's no need anymore to buy, a CRM or an ERP or an accounting bit of software or whatever. And then how does this cater for the cloud then? What's the, everybody talks about cloud.
Yeah, I mean, that's a called in service. So as I said before, the application doesn't care what the data is. So you may well have all the data basically stored on the cloud. It could be multiple clouds across the whole planet. As far as you're concerned, as long as the metadata knows where the data is,
right, you can go and grab it and bring it back and offer it up to the user to do what they want to do to build.
Obviously, you then have an accessibility issue in terms of network speed. But what we tend to do is we tend to solve the issue that we've got, which is my network's not fast enough, by basically putting loads of integrations, copying data, and making the problem worse.
Sure.
Whereas especially with the onset of 5G and 6G and whatever we're going to have next, networks are so fast nowadays.
Yes.
That and you can get such incredible capability that if you spend a little bit less software engineering and a little bit more just basically making your network better, then you're going to get the same benefit. And you won't have the overhead of managing all that software inventory. So
is this in some ways a precursor to what people are terming blockchain? Is there something there that is a similar aspect to what you use?
Yes, I suppose you can make some comparisons there. I mean, blockchain is still an implementation.
Yeah.
One of the things that, so it's not an architectural model, should we say? So the business model executable platform could effectively implement that as a blockchain.
Right.
Yeah, if we wanted to, as far as it's concerned, it doesn't really care. So So as long as it can be done instantly without having to actually generate out code or all that kind of stuff. As long as the model executes and the business system is immediately there.
And once it's in place and you've got no code, because it sounds like it's codeless.
Well, the framework is the code, so the framework just basically executes the metadata rules. So.
But and then who's updating that? Is it the business user? Is it me in my little tribe? Am I continuing to update that and build?
Hopefully as much as possible. I mean, the key is to make business people self-serve, and because if they want to change a business process, why don't they just basically prototype it and then say, okay, well, or prototype it 4 ways, and then try them out and say, no, I like that one.
So let me ask you a question. Are there other approaches like this out there that are similar or attempting to do similar things to disrupt the industry?
It's always been here. For me, it's under the banner of CASE, computer-aided system engineering. It's just that now we have the platforms to make it much better than we did 20 or so years ago. But what's happened is investment in these things has been very, very low.
Yeah.
Because people have been selling code and selling applications like crazy. Yeah. So we went through the ERP thing, and then we went through best of breed applications, and we went through a number of methodologies for business systems there, and one of the things that was never really attempted because the tools and the frameworks weren't there.
Yeah.
So it's really a shame that the onset of the internet, when it got to a certain speed capability and a certain richness of UI, is at that point that was the tipping point to say, well, actually, model
we can do this
now will work. And that's probably really in the last decade or so, and it's been over the last 8 or so years that I've been working on this to basically say, well, actually, we've now got all the bits in place, fast networks, global connectivity. We've got all the things in place to actually do this now. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, look, Robert Vane, I'm going to thank you for coming onto the show. I've certainly learned a lot about semantics and ontologies, and the self-executing business model. And I wish you luck in that journey of yours.
Thank
and
you.
It certainly sounds like something that should be part of the business moving forward.
It should be an option. It should be an option to say, okay, we want to self-construct this, and therefore, if we're going to self-construct it, let's do it in a way that's as painless as possible.
Absolutely, and I think. I think that's the thing around the process point of view, because I've always been looked at it in even more so now when I'm looking at data itself and the strategies behind that and how we do the end-to-end of leveraging data as an asset and getting value from it. And it's very much I go in and I want to understand the process because I'm underpinning it. But very often I get this sort of blank looks and, well, I'm sure there's a process document somewhere. So no,
it's the process, isn't it, and the interactions that are unique to your business.
Yes. Yeah.
Most all retail business effectively manipulate the same business concepts.
Yeah.
Or pretty much the same. 95%. It's your processes and your interactions and your people that are actually
absolutely. And I think. Yes, and I think the technology bit there's can wait, because those things need to be sorted out before you get to a point of saying, okay, fine, I need some I need some architecture here, or whatever it might be to underpin that. But we're continuously doing it the other way around.
Yeah.
And we will, you know, I say it, we will. And it's probably, and you're probably sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, Samir, don't say that.
Yeah,
but I think we've got to have a real mindset change for this stuff to really have an impact, have you know, for people to say, oh, you're right. You know, I really do want to design my own process and keep building it and, you know, leveraging that rather than having to buy a new application or, you know, a new integration tool.
Yeah, the pain you've got to go through every 5 to 10 years or so to actually move the features and the capabilities you've already got to a brand new application. Well, millions and millions and millions of pounds.
And the lines of code that you've got to deal with, and you know, as you say, millions of lines of code that you might have to.
And all the features that basically were in the old one that have embedded that you've got workarounds on that are in the new one.
Oh yeah. Well,
and all the business change around it.
People are and that's the thing, right? Because, you know, I was gonna, you know, you've brought up another good point around change management and how the context of organizational design is actually in your hands. You're actually being able to rapidly drive change very easily and very swiftly, I'm assuming, with something.
That's right. It's great if you can basically put in place an organizational change in concept, prototype it, create the new processes, see if it works, and then basically say we're going to switch across. It's all the same data underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where can they find? Where can the listeners? Where can the viewers find more about you and Q6FSA and your?
Yeah, well, certainly my YouTube channel. Okay. So if you search for Q6FSA on YouTube, you'll get my channel there.
And that's Q6 Foxtrot Sierra Alpha. Q6FSA. Yep.
Q6, the 6 questions, the 6 honest men. What, when, where, how, why.
There you go. I didn't know that.
And FSA is federated subject area, so that's all about.
Right.
Federation.
There we go. I should have asked you that at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I could have called it something, you know, like fun, like glump or
well, it wouldn't. I mean, you know.
You know, I'm an architect. I'm not a fun person.
Well, look, it's been fun speaking to you. I've certainly learned a lot.
You too.
And thank you very much for that. It's been interesting, and I'm sure, and I hope that this methodology and approach is adopted, certainly for the ease of use and development. It sounds like it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.